Chapter 161. Mr. Chen, it's really you who came here, I'm so happy, sit down. Gao Ren actually pushed out his office chair and let David sit on it. Gao Ren's enthusiasm made David a little overwhelmed. Even if he had asked Lin Tianyu to greet him in advance, he wouldn't be like this. Mr. Gao, you know me? David asked blankly. Of course I know. I was there at the ancient banquet. At that time, Mr. Chen's majesty was still vivid in my mind. Then Feng Sihai didn't even give the ancient face, and he was not defeated by Mr. Chen in the end. When Gao Ren mentioned that day's banquet, his heart surged. At that time, Feng Sihai brought the people from the Chelong gang over, and scared them all. After all, they were all businessmen, and they had never done anything. But then David came forward to settle Feng Sihai, which made them all respect David. Seeing Gao Ren mention about the banquet that day, David smiled and finally understood why Gao Ren was so enthusiastic. Knowing this, he doesn't need to bother Lin Tianyu to say hello, he can just come directly. I'm just a salesman now, I'm just here to discuss cooperation with Mr. Gao. I don't need to mention the past. David said very modestly. I know, Gao Ren nodded again, and immediately said to the secretary, Xiao Li, have you drawn up the contract you have drawn up? It has been drawn up. Secretary Li hurriedly took out the prepared contract. Mr. Chen, take a look first. If you feel that the contract is inappropriate, we can change it. Gao Ren handed the contract to David. David held the contract and said without looking at it, don't look at it, I believe Mr. Gao. If that's the case, then we'll sign. Gao Ren hurriedly took out the pen and handed it to David. But just when David was about to sign, Jordan broke in with Delia. Master Xiao. Seeing Jordan, Gao Ren frowned slightly. Although Jordan broke in rudely, Gao Ren didn't dare to say anything. After all, the strength of the Xiao family is not comparable to that of his Tianmei company. Although Tianmei company has done a great job in daily chemical industry, the Xiao family is an all-round development. It is a group company and involves many industries. Mr. Gao, I'm here to discuss cooperation with you. I remember that the two of us have been talking very well. Why did you suddenly sign the contract with someone else? Jordan's face is very cold. Mr. Xiao, we signed the contract with Xinyu Company after much consideration. After all, we are all businessmen, and we pay attention to interests. Gao Ren explained with a smile on his face. Shish. Are you taking me for a fool? Jordan's eyes widened. Xinyu Company will send a small salesman, and you will sign a contract with them. Are you taking their benefits? You know I came here on behalf of the Xiao family, but I gave you enough face, you don't know what to do. Jordan was angry. He originally came to mock David, but who knew that he had become a clown? If David signed the contract away, where would his face be? Seeing Jordan say this, the smile on Gao Ren's face disappeared instantly. Young Master Xiao, I hope you can speak more clearly. Tianmei Company is mine. I will sign with whomever I want. No matter how powerful your Xiao family is, it's still your turn to call my company. Gao Ren was no longer polite, and said coldly. Jordan was stunned for a moment, he really didn't expect that Gao Ren would dare to talk to him like this. Are you talking to me like this? Jordan frowned, his face turned ashen. Believe it or not, within a month, I will let your company get out of Horrendal. Chapter 162. Humph. Gao Ren sneered. Whatever, I have nothing to be afraid of. Jordan saw that threats didn't work, and there was nothing he could do for a while. General Manager Gao. At this time, Li Jian, who was eavesdropping on the outside, panicked, and hurried in. Now our company, whether it is production or sales, I feel that it is the best choice to cooperate with the Xiao family. But also to maximize the benefits. Li Jian took advantage of the Xiao family. If the contract is not negotiated, he will spit out the money. Maybe this Jordan will stab the matter out. Li Jian, when did you start taking care of the contract? Don't forget that you're just an office director, it's not your turn to speak here. Gao Ren shouted at Li Jian. Li Jian was so frightened that he didn't dare to make a sound, so he could only stand by obediently. Yusa strongly recommend cooperating with the Xiao family. Did you take the Xiao family's money? David asked Li Jian. Art, don't spit blood, whoever took the money, I just see your character is not good, a person's character, but can represent his company. Li Jian scolded David angrily. Gao Ren on the side was stunned, and then cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He knew who David was, but he didn't expect this Li Jian to dare to scold David. Isn't this FCU King old birthday star hanging to death? Gao Ren had always been afraid that he would offend David if he didn't serve him well. At this time, his employees dared to scold David. FCUKU, why are you talking to Mr. Chen? Kneel down for me. Gao Ren kicked Li Jian fiercely and yelled loudly. Li Jian was stunned, and looked at Gao Ren in disbelief. Gao. President Gao, he's just a salesman, you. What are you doing? Pin your mother, IFCU King make you kneel, can't you hear? Gao Ren kicked Li Jian fiercely again, and the swear words in his mouth made him terrified. If David was angry, whether it was Lin Tianyu or Ji Wenchen, even the Su family could easily bring down his company. Li Jian was kicked fiercely on his calf, and he knelt down with a thud. Mr. Chen, it was my lax discipline that offended you. I will fire him now. As for whether he received money, I will also investigate. Gao Ren followed David in a cold sweat and apologized. Gao Ren, did you take the wrong medicine? David is just a prisoner of reform through labor. You are so low-key, and you are still the boss of such a big company. It's a FCU King shame. Jordan saw Gao Ren's respectful look to David, and his heart burst into an atmosphere, and then he said contemptuously. Gao Ren gave Jordan a cold look without explaining. Since Jordan still doesn't know David's strength, he will continue to let him jump, but Gao Ren believes that the Xiao family won't be able to jump for a few days. The Xiao family is very powerful, but if they really want to follow Lin Tianyu, Ji Wenchen and the Su family to fight against each other, they don't have the qualifications at all. Mr. Gao, let's sign the contract, I don't want anyone to disturb. David said lightly. Understood. Gao Ren nodded, and immediately said to Secretary Li, see off the guest, if anyone insists on leaving, call the security guard immediately. Secretary Li nodded and said to Jordan, young Master Xiao, please put. Jordan looked at Gao Ren angrily, but at this time Jordan also knew that staying on would only make himself more embarrassed, so he pulled Delia and walked out, but when he reached the door, he turned around and said, Gao Ren, wait for me, I have 10,000 ways to make you regret it. After Jordan and Delia left, Gao Ren looked at Li Jian who was kneeling on the ground and said, get out of here too, and settle the account with you later. Chapter 163. Where did Li Jian dare to stay, and hurriedly ran out. Li Jian, who returned to the office, was very angry for a long time. Seeing that Wang Hanhan was still in the office, he immediately looked at Wang Hanhan with an evil face. Wang Hanhan saw that Li Jian was back, and his face was so angry that he was too scared to speak out. How are you thinking? Let me tell you, as long as you promise me, I can guarantee 100% to sign a contract with your company. Li Jian already knew that the contract was signed with Xinyu Company, that's why he made such a guarantee. Li Jian, can you change your request? Wang Hanhan looked embarrassed. Another request. Li Jian sneered, do you know how much the contract is worth this time? If you can sign the contract, the commission alone is beyond your imagination, and there is no problem in buying a building. Such a big deal. Interest, it's not too much to sleep with you for one night, right? If I spend money to find a chick, I can find 100 of them. Wang Hanan's face was flushed, and he bit his lip hard. Li Jian looked at Wang Hanhan like that. If he wasn't in the office, he would have pounced on him now. I promise you, but you have to sign a contract first. After Wang Hanhan thought for a while, he nodded and said. Of course, you must sign the contract first. Li Jian raised his mouth, and then continued, I will open a room to wait for you at night, you can just wait for my call, remember to wear S3XY. Wang Hanhan turned around and walked out, she couldn't listen anymore. But just as Wang Hanhan turned around and walked out of Li Jian's office, he saw David coming downstairs. Brother David. Wang Hanhan didn't expect David to come so quickly. Hanhan, why are you here? David said slightly after seeing Wang Hanhan. He said that he didn't need Wang Hanhan to come, but he didn't expect Wang Hanhan to come secretly. I'm here to ask my classmates for help, so it can be easier to talk about. Wang Hanhan said, looking at the contract in David's hand, he was a little surprised. Brother David, did you sign the contract? Yes, it's been signed. David handed the contract to Wang Hanhan. Looking at the contract, Wang Hanhan frowned directly. She just promised Li Jian, how could David sign the contract so quickly? Mr. Chen, who is this? After Gao Ren saw Wang Hanhan, he looked at David suspiciously. After all, he knew about David's relationship with Sonia. At that time, the two flirted with each other at the banquet, and he did not shy away from everyone. My sister, David said with a slight smile. Hanhan, this is President Gao of Tianmei, the contract we just signed. David followed Wang Hanan's introduction. Hello Mr. Gao, my name is Wang Hanhan. Wang Hanhan hurriedly reached out and shook hands with Gao Ren. Miss Wang, did you just hear that your classmate is also in our company? Gao Ren asked Wang Hanhan. Well, his name is Li Jian, the office director of your company. Wang Hanhan nodded. It's him. David frowned. Brother David, do you know him? Seeing David like that, Wang Hanhan asked suspiciously. Just now, Li Jian was still trying his best to prevent our cooperation with Tianmei. David said. When Wang Hanhan heard this, he immediately became furious. Li Jian had been deceiving her all the time. When he thought that he was still foolishly agreeing to that Li Jian, Wang Hanhan was going to die of anger. At this moment, Li Jianzheng came out of the office. When he saw that Wang Hanhan was actually with David, and that Gao Ren was also beside him, he felt that something was wrong, so he ran out. Li Jian, you Ba Five Tard, you lied to me. Seeing Li Jian, Wang Hanhan yelled and chased out. Chapter 164. When David saw this, he seemed to understand something. He rushed out with a vigorous step and brought Li Jian back directly. Wang Hanhan grabbed Li Jian's hair angrily. Li Jian, didn't you say Tianmei's cooperation, you have the final say. You even want to use the contract to blackmail me, sleep with me, you are really not human. Wang Hanhan was really pissed off, and beat Li Jian desperately, but Li Jian didn't dare to dodge, he could only endure Wang Hanan's torrential slap. David was exuding murderous aura all over his body at this moment. Li Jian actually used this to threaten Wang Hanhan. If he hadn't signed the contract himself, wouldn't Li Jian have succeeded? After a while, Wang Hanhan was tired and looked at David with tears in his eyes. Brother David, I didn't want you to be fired, so I agreed to this Ba Five Tard. Hanhan, I know, it's all right. David patted Wang Hanhan gently, and then looked at Li Jian with cold eyes. Feeling the cold murderous aura on David's body, Li Jian was so frightened that his whole body trembled slightly. I was wrong, I was just joking, we are old classmates, how could I do such a thing? Li Jian desperately apologized, but the apology at this time has long been useless. I don't want to kill people today. David finished, grabbing Li Jian's arm with one hand, and a huge spiritual force emanated from David's body, directly shattering Li Jian's entire arm. What? Li Jian screamed in pain. At this time, apart from the flesh, Li Jian's arm has broken bones, and there is no possibility of connecting it. Brother David. Seeing this, Wang Hanhan hurriedly pulled David away. She was afraid that David would kill Li Jian for her sake. That would be a violation of the law, and she couldn't let David go to jail any longer. Looking at the worried Wang Hanhan, David did not take action, but looked at Gao Ren and said, Mr. Gao, this is your person, you can handle it yourself. Gao Ren trembled with fright, and nodded quickly, don't worry, I will definitely discipline you well. David left with Wang Hanhan, he knew that Gao Ren would have a way to deal with that Li Jian. When David and Wang Hanhan returned with the contract, the entire sales department was in a huge shock. Everyone looked at the contract to make sure it was real. Everyone looked at David in disbelief. They really couldn't understand what method David used to win the contract of Tianmei Company in such a short period of time. Kui Ziyuan held the contract, his hands were shaking slightly, because only he knew the weight of this contract. As the sales manager, this contract can also bring him huge benefits. Although he hates David and wants to fire David very much, but this time David got the contract back, which really benefited him a lot. Although he was happy in his heart, Kui Ziyuan tried his best to hide it, and said with an indifferent expression, David, this time you can sign the contract, and it is also because of me and Sun Xiaomeng who have run countless times before, you don't have to be complacent. Although you passed the test this time, you don't need to be fired, but that doesn't mean you can pass the next test. After Kui Ziyuan finished speaking, he put away the contract and went straight to the general manager's office. This is a big deal for the company. Ziyuan, Sun Xiaomeng immediately chased after Kui Ziyuan after leaving the sales department. Seeing that it was Sun Xiaomeng, Kui Ziyuan stopped. Tell me, how much can you raise for this contract? Although Sun Xiaomeng knew that this contract could raise a lot of commissions, she still didn't know the exact amount. Kui Ziyuan grinned, didn't you always like the house in Pine Bay? I'll show you the house tomorrow and choose a house type that you like. This contract will bring us a steady stream of wealth later in the contract. A house is fine. Chapter 165. When Sun Xiaomeng heard this, she was so happy that she almost jumped up and said excitedly, really? It seems that this David is not useless. HMPH, I think he's just relying on the foundation we laid before. Kui Ziyuan snorted coldly, he didn't think David was responsible for this. Yes, if we hadn't moved out earlier, how could David have signed the contract so easily? Sun Xiaomeng also nodded quickly. Okay, I'm going to hand over the contract to President Xing. President Xing will definitely reward me. Maybe I'll be transferred directly to the purchasing department. After Kui Ziyuan finished speaking, he happily took the contract and went to the general manager's office. Because he was so happy, Kui Ziyuan walked in without knocking on the door. At this time, Xing Jun was on the phone, and when he saw someone suddenly broke in, he immediately hung up the phone. Seeing that it was Kui Ziyuan, Xing Jun's face became extremely gloomy. At this time, Kui Ziyuan also knew that he was in trouble. He was so frightened that he picked up the contract and said, "Mr. Xing, we signed the contract with Tianmei. After all, this is a big contract, maybe Xing Jun won't be angry when he hears the news." But Kui Ziyuan was wrong. When Kui Ziyuan's voice just fell, Xing Jun instantly became furious. Get out for me." Immediately afterwards, Xing Jun slammed the teacup towards Kui Ziyuan. Wow. The cup shattered in response, so frightened that Kui Ziyuan hurriedly ran out. Xing Jun gritted his teeth at the moment, gasping for breath, obviously not light. He already knew that David had successfully signed the contract with Tianmei Company. Originally, he planned to let David be humiliated, but he did not expect that Jordan was the one who was humiliated. The phone call just now was from Jordan, and he scolded Xing Jun directly. Now Xing Jun doesn't want to stay in the Su family, so he has contact with Jordan, and now the handle of his betrayal of the Su family is in Jordan's hands holding it. Even if Jordan scolds him, he can only swallow it. "Ziyuan, what did President Xing say? Did you say how much the commission will be?" Seeing that Kui Ziyuan was back, Sun Xiaomeng immediately asked happily. "Tell me AF. Art, I don't know what happened today, you scolded me." Kui Ziyuan took the contract and returned to the office with a displeased face. Sun Xiaomeng also hurried in and comforted Kui Ziyuan. After get off work at noon, David packed up and prepared to go to Su's house. After all, he promised Sonia that he would have a meal with Ruben at noon today. "Brother David, I signed such a big contract today. Let's celebrate together at noon. I know that there is a Western restaurant nearby that is very good." Wang Hanhan found David and said happily. David was stunned for a moment, and said a little embarrassedly, "I have something to do at noon, you can eat it yourself, and we will celebrate in the evening." Seeing this, Wang Hanhan was a little disappointed and said, "Well then." Seeing David walking out of the company's back, Wang Hanhan always felt that she had a estrangement with David. She could not see through David, nor could she enter David's heart. David walked out of the company and wanted to drive to Chang'an, but he saw Sonia sitting in the car not far away, honking the horn constantly. David saw that Sonia came to pick him up, so he had to put away his car keys and walk towards Sonia. "You are so busy, come to pick me up in person." After David got into the car, he said with a faint smile, "I'm not afraid that you will let me dove. The ancients are here now. If you don't go, I will be embarrassed." Chapter 166. "Brother David, is it because of this woman that you didn't eat with me?" Wang Hanhan muttered to himself, his eyes were already wet. Su family villa. Ruben and Ji Wenchen are sitting in the living room drinking tea and chatting. In the past, although Ruben was the richest man in Horrendal, he would not have had the opportunity to drink tea and chat with Ji Wenchen. Now Ruben's identity is different. Everyone has recognized that Ruben is David's father-in-law. This identity is much more powerful than the title of the richest man in Horrendal. Soon, Sonia followed David there. After seeing David, Ji Wenchen hurriedly got up. "Mr. Chen. You don't have to be so polite in ancient times, you seem to be very tough during this time." David smiled slightly. "It's not thanks to Mr. Chen, or else my old bones would have been sucked up by the resentful dragon long ago." Ji Wenchen knew that his body was so good thanks to David. If it wasn't for David's action, Ji Wenchen would have been sitting on the dragon chair all day long, and his body would have collapsed long ago. "It's still my old physique." David laughed. "David, I heard Sonia say that you are going to work in Xinyu Raihua now." Ruben asked David. "Well, I became a salesperson." David nodded. "Why are you struggling? When I asked you if you liked doing business, you said whether you liked it or not. Now you're going to be a small salesperson. You don't want to start from the bottom, right?" Ruben asked. David shook his head. He didn't know how to explain it. When he went to the interview, he didn't know that the company belonged to the Su family. Moreover, he didn't plan to work all the time, just to stabilize his parents temporarily. Seeing that David did not speak, Ruben continued, "I have already notified someone to do it. When I go to work on Monday, I will directly give you Sonia's chairmanship. Anyway, Sonia will not go to the company for a month or two. I expect Xing Jun to manage it alone, and I don't worry about it." When David heard this, he was immediately confused, and waved his hands again and again. President Sue, I don't want to do it. I really don't have time to manage the company. Being this salesman is just to stabilize my parents. I have more important things to do. Do it. David didn't want to be entangled by mundane things. He had to hurry up to cultivate, or he wouldn't be able to land on the nameless island on July 15th. Don't hold back. This matter is settled like this. It's not that you work in the company every day. You can just do your own business. Ruben thought that David was embarrassed and politely declined, so he let David take over. Seeing this, David couldn't say anything. The food is ready, and a few people eat and chat. Ancient, are you looking for me because of the spirit pen? David agreed to come over for dinner because Sonia said that Gu Wenchen had something to do with him. Gu Wenchen said with an embarrassed expression, Mr. Chen, I've already spoken to Taoist True, he's already on his way back, and it shouldn't take a few days. Yu Lao Gu has been bothered. David is now very eager to heal his mother's eyes. It's nothing, I have something I would like to ask Mr. Chen to help with. Gu Wenchen said. Ancient, feel free to say anything, as long as I can do it, I will never refuse. David nodded. Mr. Chen, I know that you have unpredictable power. I have an old friend who took his wife to sweep the tomb once, and his wife started to go crazy. There was no way to seek doctors and medicines everywhere. I think Mr. Chen may be heal. Ever since Gu Wenchen saw David forcing out the resentful dragon on the dragon chair, he has already fallen in love with David. Chapter 167. After I went to the cemetery, I was crazy when I came back. Most of them were haunted by ghosts. There is no big problem. David said lightly. If Mr. Chen can be cured, I will tell this old friend of mine now and ask him to bring his wife to see Mr. Chen. Gu Wenchen happily took out his mobile phone and prepared to make a call. David waved his hand and stopped Gu Wenchen. Guo is not in a hurry, this kind of thing is best seen at night. Gu told me the address. After get off work, I can go there in person. That's really bothering Mr. Chen, Gu repeatedly thanked him. It's just a little effort, I beg the ancients to find the spirit pen, it's not the same as bothering you. David said with a smile. Helping each other, don't be polite to each other, the dishes will be cold for a while. Ruben opened his mouth, otherwise he didn't know when the two of them would be polite. After the meal, David was sent back to the company by Sonia. David, I'll pick you up at night and go see with you. I've never encountered a ghost possessed before. Sonia followed David excitedly. Aren't you afraid? David asked with a little playfulness when he saw Sonia's excited look. What are you afraid of, aren't you here? I know that you are highly skilled in medicine, and you can attract ghosts and souls. Some children are scared to cry at night, and some doctors are fine with a few spells, no injections and no medicine. Sonia said indifferently. David smiled and didn't say anything, he knew that when Sonia really saw it, he might be scared to death. David got out of the car, Sonia drove straight away, and upstairs, Wang Hanhan was still standing by the window, she had been waiting for David to come back, she wanted to see who this girl was. It's just that this time she didn't see it clearly, only saw David walking down from the car with a smile on his face. When David returned to the sales department, he saw that Wang Hanhan was in a wrong mood, so he asked, Hanhan, what's the matter with you? It's okay. Wang Hanhan didn't look at David, but just tried his best to squeeze out a smile and left. David didn't care too much, he just sat down at his workstation to work. In the afternoon, the Su Group head office issued a document, which was placed directly on the desk of General Manager Xing Jun. Looking at the contents of the document, Xing Jun's face became extremely ugly and hideous. The content of the document is personnel adjustment. David will be the chairman of Xinyu Raihua, which will officially take effect next Monday. In this way, David became Xing Jun's immediate boss. Why? Xing Jun looked at the contents of the document, roared loudly, and ripped the document to shreds. Mr. Xing, what's wrong? The secretary heard the movement and hurried in. Get out of here. Xing Jun yelled at the secretary and directly scolded the secretary and ran away. At this moment, Xing Jun, the whole person seems to be in madness, his eyes are a little scarlet. David, it's all because of you, I'm going to kill you. Xing Jun gritted his teeth. He was a top student who had been in the Su family for so many years, but he was actually defeated by a reform-through labor prisoner. Xing Jun is not convinced, at this moment his heart has become extremely distorted. After a long time, Xing Jun's mood slowly calmed down. Looking at the documents that he had torn to shreds, he slowly opened his drawer. At this moment, in Xing Jun's drawer, a pistol was placed in it. Looking at the pistol in front of him, Xing Jun seems to be making a difficult decision. Slowly picking up the gun, Xing stroked the cold body of the gun, and he had already made a decision in his heart. Chapter 168. Kui Ziyuan, let David come to my office. Xing picked up the internal phone and called Kui Ziyuan. Kui Ziyuan, who was originally angry in the office, was surprised when he received a call from Xing. Ziyuan, what is President Xing doing with David? Sun Xiaomeng asked. How would I know? Kui Ziyuan frowned, he always felt something was wrong. Isn't President Xing giving all the commission to David? I have long seen that David has a relationship with President Xing. Otherwise, how could such a good thing be handed over to David? Sun Xiaomeng said with a look of anger, very dissatisfied. Okay, stop nagging, I'm annoying now. Kui Ziyuan glared at Sun Xiaomeng, then walked out of the office, came to David's workstation and said, David, President Xing asked you to come to his office, probably because of the contract, what should you say after you go there? You should know it yourself, if it wasn't for Xiaomeng and I to have a good relationship before, would you be able to sign the contract so easily? David glanced at Kui Ziyuan, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, and he let out a sneer. He didn't say anything, just got up and left. Seeing David like that, Kui Ziyuan was furious. What, could you stay in this company if Xiaomeng didn't introduce you to come in? Dare to fight against me, I will make you regret it sooner or later. Xing office, after David arrived, the secretary wanted to report, but David pushed the door and walked in, and the secretary couldn't stop it. Mr. Xing, he forced his way in. The secretary was so frightened that she hurriedly explained to Xing. Xing looked at David and waved his hand towards the secretary. Go out, no one is allowed to come in without me. Seeing this, the secretary nodded and went out, and closed the door. Sit down. Xing pointed to the chair in front of him. David was not polite and sat directly opposite Xing. The two looked at each other like this for a full minute, and no one said a word. If you have anything to do with me, just tell me quickly, I'm busy. David saw that Xing had been silent, so he said. David, I have checked your background, you are an ordinary person, and you have been in prison. How can you get Sonia's love? Why can you be the chairman of the company? Why? Xing stared at David, he just couldn't understand, he is a top student studying abroad, why Sonia doesn't like herself, but likes David. If David was a rich son, or a second-generation official, Xing would feel better, but David is an ordinary person who has been in prison. Even so, Sonia would rather like David. I don't like myself either, which makes Xing really can't understand. No, why do you like someone so much? Sonia just likes me, what can you do? The corners of David's mouth raised slightly, and he said playfully. David's expression and tone suddenly stimulated Xing. Xing, who had tried to calm down originally, exploded in an instant. David, I want you to get out of Horrendal immediately, leave Sonia, and don't come back from now on, or I will definitely make you regret it. Xing was trembling slightly, his eyes were wide open, and he yelled at David forcefully. Regret. David sneered, I have never regretted it, and you are not qualified to order me, let alone threaten me. You want you to see if I am qualified to order you. Xing said, suddenly took out the pistol in the drawer and aimed directly at David. This is the first time that Xing has pointed a gun at a person, and his hands are shaking so much. Chapter 169. Seeing that Xing actually took out a gun and aimed it at him, the sneer on David's face became even more obvious. Seeing that David was not afraid at all, Xing roared, I can really shoot, as long as I pull the trigger, you will immediately splatter blood on the spot. Then why don't you shoot? I see that your hands are shaking so badly, I'm afraid you can't shoot right. I'll get closer, so you can aim. David actually moved his body towards Xing so that the gun in Xing hand was closer to the nearest. Seeing David's reaction, Xing face flushed with anger. David, I can really shoot, you get out of Horrendal now, I can spare your life, or I will kill you. Xing entire face was flushed. He had never killed anyone, let alone killed anyone with a gun. This gun was assembled from spare parts he bought himself. When he was abroad, he liked firearms. Very strict, Xing secretly assembled one. Although he likes to play with guns, he has never hit anyone with a gun, let alone killed anyone. Now Xing is trying his best to control himself, but his hands are still trembling. Looking at Xing face, David's face was full of sneers. Just like you, I'm afraid you don't even dare to kill a chicken, right? You dare to kill. Don't force me, I will really shoot. Xing was sweating profusely at the moment. Although he had already made a decision, Xing was still nervous at the last moment. Now you put down the gun, I may still save your life, if you shoot, the person who died will definitely be yours. David's face turned gloomy. What are you talking about? I'll shoot you to death now, and then go abroad directly. Who can do what to me? Xing Jun didn't believe what David said. Now that the gun is in his hands, he has absolute initiative. If you don't believe it, then shoot, shoot. David suddenly raised his voice, directly startling that Xing Jun. But because of this fright, the gun in Xing Jun's hand also pulled the trigger directly. Boom. After a gunshot, I saw a spark burst out from the muzzle, and the bullet flew out of the gun chamber in a spinning. This time, Xing Jun was taken aback. He was not mentally prepared at all. This was a nervous pull of the trigger. David's hand grasped in the void, and the bullet was directly caught in his hand. At this moment, David's hand was wrapped in spiritual power, and the bullet couldn't hurt at all. Slowly open his hand, and the bullet of yellow-orange is exposed. Receiving bullets empty-handed. This time, Xing Jun was stupid, and the pistol in his hand fell directly to the ground. I said, as long as you shoot, you will surely die. After David finished speaking, his body exuded a terrifying murderous aura. The murderous aura directly enveloped Xing Jun. Feeling the murderous aura on David, Xing Jun's scalp was numb, as if he had fallen into the abyss. No, no, it's impossible, impossible, how could you possibly catch a bullet? Xing Jun's face was full of horror, and he shook his head desperately. He couldn't believe that everything in front of him was real, he couldn't understand it, it was beyond his cognition range. Xing Jun is just an ordinary person, not even a martial artist, so he doesn't know the magical powers of martial arts at all. Nothing is impossible. If you don't believe it, you can shoot a shot. David's eyes narrowed slightly, and the cold light in his eyes made Xing Jun fall directly from the chair to the ground. Xing Jun didn't dare to shoot, he didn't even have the courage to pick it up. Receiving bullets empty-handed. Although Xing Jun couldn't believe it, this was the fact in front of him, and he couldn't bear to believe it. At this moment, Xing Jun seems to want to understand why David, a seemingly ordinary guy who has been in prison, can be liked by Sonia. Chapter 170. Can a person who can catch a bullet with his bare hands be an ordinary person? Xing Jun knew that David must have another identity that he couldn't find out at all. Xing Jun also remembered the scene in Zaixian and Zhuang. Liao Feixiang did not treat David, but scolded himself. Now it seems that this Liao Feixiang is also afraid of David's identity. It turned out that he was not from the same world with David at all. Xing Jun had always been proud of himself as a returnee, thinking that he was 100 times stronger than David, but at this moment he suddenly realized that he was still superficial. Please, please don't kill me. Xing Jun was cowardly, afraid, he was afraid of death, and he dared to kill. He just pulled the trigger under tension. Even though he had already prepared for it, Xing Jun still did not dare to pull the trigger to kill when he really faced it. Looking at Xing Jun like that, David also lost interest in killing him, and threw the bullet to the ground, and said coldly, starting today, get out of Horrendal, don't let me see you. After David finished speaking, he turned around and walked out of the office. When the office door opened, the secretary was at the door. When she saw Xing Jun kneeling on the ground through the crack of the open door, she was stunned. David glanced at the secretary and was startled, but David didn't say anything or close the door, so he let the secretary look at Xing Jun, who was kneeling on the ground. Go away, go away. Xing Jun roared at the secretary. The secretary was so frightened that he ran away in a hurry, and he was also in a panic, for fear that he would be expelled because he saw Xing Jun's ugliness. The secretary didn't know yet, but at this moment, Xing Jun slowly picked up the gun and bullets, glanced at his office, and left. Since then, Xing Jun has never appeared in the company, nor in Horrendal. David, did Mr. Xing ask you to tell you about the commission? How did you follow Mr. Xing? Seeing David returning to the sales department, Kui Ziyuan hurriedly asked David. Although he didn't like to talk to David very much, Kui Ziyuan still found David for the commission. Nothing. David glanced at Kui Ziyuan and said coldly. David, I think you just want to take the commission all by yourself, right? I can tell you that the company stipulates that any contract signed by anyone in the sales department has a part of the commission for the manager, not to mention that Tianmei company has been running for several months, it's just a contract for nothing, don't think that you are amazing, if it wasn't for my introduction, would you be able to join the company? Seeing David like that, Sun Xiaomeng said angrily. I don't care about that commission, if there is, I don't want any. David glanced at that Sun Xiaomeng, and then said lightly. David, this is what you said, everyone has heard it, you don't want it at all, don't regret it. When Kui Ziyuan heard this, he hurriedly said loudly, for fear that David would regret it. I won't regret it. David smiled coldly. Kui Ziyuan is happy now. If David doesn't want the commission, then it's all his. When it comes time to buy a suite in Pine Bay, it should be no problem to pay a down payment. Everyone else in the sales department looked at David in shock, and they all laughed at David's stupidity. There must be a lot of commission for such a big contract. Han, you are in the same group with David. David's commission is no longer needed. You must do it. Don't be as stupid as him. Wang Lanlin came to Wang Hanan's side and whispered. Wang Hanhan glanced at David not far away, then shook his head and said, I don't want it either. This contract was not signed by himself, and Wang Hanhan didn't want any commission. As for why David didn't want a commission, Wang Hanhan didn't want to ask. Maybe it was because he had found a rich woman's girlfriend, so he didn't like this money. Both of them are sick, they have a grudge with money. Wang Lanlin pouted and left. After Sonia finished speaking, she kicked the accelerator and rushed out. But at this time, Wang Hanhan upstairs was standing at the window and saw David got into a red luxury car, driven by a woman, but because the distance was too far, Wang Hanhan could not see the woman's face clearly. Hold tightly together. Chapter 1.